Welcome to NFL Daily, where my kind of Memorial Day is all about ranking decision makers in the NFL. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio, and I'm joined by Patrick Claybon, and it is time. Patrick, how long have you been at the company?
I have been at the company since October of 2013.
Okay. Wow. 12 years in, almost. Totally. That is amazing. And you've reached your most important day at the company because we're throwing you into the fire. We are going to determine who are the best NFL decision makers right now.
I have waited for a very long time to be a part of the rankings apparatus.
Okay.
And I am here and I'm ready. As people are, celebrating their holiday in which way that they want. I want them to get into this exercise as well. And go through the thought experiments that we did and try to come up with rankings of your own and tell us where we're wrong.
I mean, I feel a little bit of sarcasm there.
I'm not being sarcastic.
There are some people that turn their noses up at rankings. They don't love them as much. I enjoy it. I enjoy making them. I enjoy consuming them. And yes, it is a perfect Memorial Day. Get out on the beach and either listen to rankings or do some rankings. So we're going to talk about the GMs, the decision makers, no matter what their title is. We're not going to count the guys who haven't had a chance to go through a complete year. So that's James Gladstone of the Jaguars, Mike Borgonzi of the Titans, Darren Muji of the Jets, and John Spytek of the Raiders. I believe that's it. So we're going to rank the rest of them. We had a random drawing before the show of who is going to get the first overall pick. It feels like an obvious one. Patrick won the drawing. Who are you taking?
With the first pick in our 2025 GM draft, I would like to select Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles. And it feels chalky because it is. I tried to develop a metric using the weighted adjusted value on Pro Football Reference on the draft page.
Wow.
For players, which is going to skew towards the guys who have been drafting players the longest because it's a cumulative thing. Like if you draft Calais Campbell, you've got every collective season that Calais has had. But in that metric, in looking at the trades, the decisions, even if you want to ding him for taking Carson Wentz, he ultimately trades Carson Wentz, trades that Sam Bradford pick. They were able to make the A.J. Brown trade. You can't argue with the results of being on the cusp of one Super Bowl, keeping this team, rebuilding the roster in one season, in one draft, essentially, getting back to the Super Bowl, the coaching decisions. It's Howie for me.
Yeah, this is the easiest part. I kind of wanted to get that first pick just because I was curious, and I'll ask you after I make my pick, who you would take second, because it seems like it's Howie and then it's a big fall off. I did this exercise annually on the website, and I would mix it, Howie would move up and down depending on the year, certainly. But the last time I did it was before the 2023 draft, and he was number one overall back then. And I'm looking at this of if I could draft a GM to run my team, who would I draft? And he's the guy who has the most flexibility. One thing I think he's done really well, I think doesn't get as much attention, is he's gotten a lot of veterans who are just about to pop off and hit their prime. Hassan Reddick was one. Javon Hargrave was one. Zach Bond is the most recent one. But he's not afraid to then keep them at a higher rate like Bond. And so that's awesome. And I looked, and the entire defense are Howie draft picks, by the way, right now. The entire starting defense. Wow. And most of the offense, it's mostly homegrown guys. It's A.J. Brown, it's Saquon. I mean, another guy picking up at the right time of his career. And it's guys that they've grown inside that system. All right, number 2. I am going to take Brad Holmes of the Detroit Lions. Would any of you have taken him?
Rankings very similar, Greg.
Okay.
Very similar.
No, that was tough. I had about 4 guys that I wouldn't argue with if you took second overall. Here's the thing with Holmes. The last time, again, that I did the GM draft, the GM rankings, I'll refer to this a little bit. He was 7th. And at the time I was like, he might be getting a little bit of a push where if you only have a couple years to look at, then you're more likely to have a good couple years, but it's tough to sustain it and keep it going. And he's only done better the last couple of years. We went through the position groups, me and Shook, ranking, and they might have the best offensive line in the league, certainly among them. The best safety group, best running backs. done a good job planning for now, planning for the future. They've had some heat checks, but ultimately, like, what more can you do than build this team? If you're a GM and you're going into this is year 5 for him, you want a slow progression, and like you could do a college course on how to build up a team, and Brad Holmes would be the best professor.
Yeah, and I understand people may have depth concerns considering what happened. I don't think it was it should be celebrated that the Lions were able to accomplish what they did.
Yes.
Considering the amount of injuries that they had last season. And you mentioned the chances. I value chances higher here, like taking shots, because my thoughts with acquiring talent is you have to try to acquire the unique talent. You can't have a certain form. It's like
Jahmyr Gibbs, for instance.
Yeah, like you have your Pete Carrolls. It's like, we want this height and weight at this position. Like Sean Payton feels that way as well, right? Like you have your designated guidelines for players, but sometimes players don't fall within those parameters, and you take a shot at them, and that's what I like Brad Holmes in that.
It's funny because the Goff trade was a win-win, and yet, just from the Lions side of things, it's one of the best transactions in retrospect of the last decade. I mean, that they got a franchise quarterback and then plus some just to take him. It worked out pretty great for them. All right, you're up, number 3.
With the 3rd pick in the 2025 GM draft, I am taking Jason Light of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Sustained success. I understand people may think like, oh, you get Tom Brady and everything. It's not just Tom. You had to kind of rebuild that roster and keep it together. And also, I did value the fact that you get honesty and communication from a GM, where it's not like you don't get any cringe comments from the guys that are going to be taken earlier here. Like, things just make sense, and the adjusted value number like ends up being, my metric makes no sense to anybody, including me, but over 10 years it is 14.2.
Okay.
Like, in comparison to like somebody like John Schneider, who's at 16, but that's 15 years. He's been there for a long time. He's acquired a lot of very good talent. He's been able to keep that talent. It hasn't had a lot of success elsewhere, and that's why I'm taking him here.
That is bold and strong. No, I think I would have taken him third. We are a Jason Light draft. The problem is, you look, and the Bucs haven't won that many games the last 3 years, and we're picking him over organizations that have won more games. But ultimately, I think his drafting, his Baker move, the offensive line, building up offensive. I like that you kind of included that he'd be a good hang, or that he'd represent you well. That is important.
Well, yeah, because I think in terms of relating with not just media, but players as well, people respect honesty, and you don't want to be doing gamesmanship. It's like, well, we're not going to negotiate through the media. Like, it's not that particular conversation. You can be honest and answer a question and also have a good faith negotiation. I don't see why those things would be contradictory.
Honestly, it's maybe part of the reason he helped get Tom Brady down there. I had to look up where is he from, because he's a funny guy. He's like, I was like, he seems like he'd be from New England, like a kind of a sarcastic New England type, but no, he's from Nebraska. Shout out to Jason Light. Number 3, big climb, by the way. Back when I did it, he was in the middle of this draft, so he's had a very strong couple of years. But I'm with you. I like how much his veterans want to stay there. I'm taking Les Snead, 4th overall. Now, like a lot of the GMs, it's a combination effort. I mean, they all are to some degree. I do think Sean McVay is very important in player acquisition in addition to Les Snead. But what Snead has shown he can do, because remember, he was with Jeff Fisher back in St. Louis, is he's shown that he can adapt and fit what he's going to do to what his coach needs. So to me, that is an asset and a point in his favor. And I lean more heavily on the last few years ultimately, because that's who I'd want now, who's doing well with the league as it stands right now. And it's tough to do any better than Jared Verse, Steve Avila, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua the last few years in the draft. And it's not like he's been any slouch in filling holes in terms of free agency and obviously getting Stafford and all that either. So he is a strong number 4 for me.
And I think a part of things that may get underrated is Sean McVay as a coach, as a human being, also requires a little bit of management as well.
Yeah.
And like managing that relationship where it's like, is Sean McVay going to be doing media? Is he going to be continuing coaching? You're a part of a franchise move from Los Angeles, from St. Louis to Los Angeles, like all of these things. And you get this, right, the memes, the F the picks shirts, but then he comes around and he has like a couple of the best drafts in recent memory, where he's doing all these things and the numbers, wound up to be 12.6 over a very long amount of time. But
that's good, right?
No, it's
great.
The highest number did wind up being John Schneider, just because of the volume of years. And you get Russell Wilson and all those guys. I think.
Well, Snead didn't have many picks for a while,
exactly,
and he made that strategy work. The fact that they so clearly had a strategy to load up on a ton of picks the last few years, and then that they've hit on so many.
Yeah, and so he was high on mine as well. And I'm running out of my top picks.
Great hair as well.
Yeah.
Shout out to Thomas Dimitrov, because Les Snead gives him a lot of credit. He's from the Thomas Dimitrov GM tree, who was a great GM back in the day. Hasn't been in the league a while, but I'm sure he's very proud of Les' success.
Also from Eufaula, Alabama. Shout out to the folks on the lake, and at one point was a Troy Trojan. So
all right,
me and Les Snead.
All right, you're the number 5 overall pick.
I am going to Buffalo to draft Brandon Beane, and ultimately, you can make the argument, it's like, oh, you draft the space alien, everything's going to look great. Nobody thought that this was going to be what Josh Allen turned out to be. There's supporting and developing a player and surrounding him with enough talent, especially the Stephon Diggs move as well, to get him that player during that point in his development. And he over 8 years, in terms of adjusted value averaging among the picks, gets up to 15.3.
Okay.
Which for that time frame is almost as close as you can get. And his Buffalo Bills have been as close as you can get multiple times, where bounces of a ball, bad plays, weird decisions have ultimately resulted in their runs ending. I think this is a great spot to get him, and so I will take him.
I think it's fine. I have 3 names ahead of him, so it's not like I have him buried. I think the top of his drafts lately haven't been good enough. Like he hasn't got enough primetime talent. Now, they're always drafting at the back of the first round, and it's not like Dalton Kincaid, for instance, is like a bad pick. But sometimes I feel like it's like their style of defense. They're like good, not great. And it's a lot of goods. And Dana Jeremiah always says, like, they're searching for doubles, and because the doubles sometimes turn into a home run. They're searching for that. I feel like the Bills have a lot of like singles to doubles. And they've settled into having a really good offensive line. Again, I gave extra points for that. Mm-hmm. And so he deserves credit. It took him a while to get there, but I had him a few spots lower. I can feel one fan base when they see these rankings being upset. So I'm actually going to go off my board and make it
Oh, wow.
Well, not just
to appease an upset fan base?
Somewhat. I'm just moving them up one spot.
They're going to be happy to hear that.
I don't think Brett Veach should. Well, they don't actually.
Not only do I disrespect your GM, I also think
I don't disrespect him. I have Brett Veach next. And on my original rankings, I had him 6th, and I just kind of want him to be 6th here. And you took Bean too early. So he's got the Super Bowls, and you can say, oh yeah, well, he's got Mahomes. Yeah, he was even more than Brandon Bean, I think, synonymous with that pick, because maybe it's just after the fact trying to take some credit, but by all accounts was pushing hard for that Mahomes pick throughout. So he gets credit for Mahomes too, but more importantly, I think they've done a good job managing how the salary cap's going to work, how many players you can't have to pay, being flexible, changing depending on the year. They do a really good job finding the right defensive backs for Steve Spagnuolo. They don't necessarily like value off-ball linebacker, and so they found really good, cheaper ways with these mid-round picks or a Drew Tranquil to like fill those type of holes while spending big money. They obviously fixed the offensive line a few years ago. Now it's taking on some problems there at left tackle, and they aggressively go for it. I think the Tyreek trade worked out as well as, could possibly work. I think he needs his wide receivers and his left tackles to hit right now, but I didn't feel comfortable with him falling any further.
Yeah, there was times where it's like you have this tremendous opportunity because you have Patrick Mahomes in the prime of his career, and they were just kind of trying to squeak by at other spots that were a little frustrating.
Right. But it's hard.
Me.
Isn't it impossible? It's because of the salary cap to be good everywhere. So the fact that they've won at least 12, no, they did win 11 games in 23, but at least 11 or more since 2018.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong.
Yeah. And the numbers also bear that out, where he winds up right in between Jason Light and the GM I'm going to pick next.
Okay,
So
and it's not all about the draft either. We're talking free agency. We're talking trades, and I think Veach has been pretty flexible and doing well in those areas as well. Although, let's be real, Andy Reid has close to as much power and I think say in terms of the personnel as almost any coach on this entire list. So Andy Reid gets a shout out here. And when we say Brett Veach, it's sort of a stand-in for Brett Veach and Andy Reid as a team. All right, you're up.
And I think that goes for my next pick, which will be John Lynch of the San Francisco 49ers.
Wow.
Who, again, some of these years were shocking to me, that it's 8 years for John Lynch in Santa Clara, coming in 12.3, a little bit behind Les Snead. And in terms of the talent acquisition, of course, they get a big boost, right? They found a starting quarterback, the very last pick in the draft. Some of the contract management stuff has taken a while, but they ultimately get it done.
Might be ownership there too. Yeah.
So that could be related. But when you're a contender for an extended period of time, you are, I guess some folks aren't, like we just discussed, Bean, right? And his acquisition strategies, which I think that they've taken shots, but the 49ers have absolutely taken shots, and that era may be over now, but I do give them credit, because to be that close for that long is something worth celebrating.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the 49ers over the last handful of years, it's still true now. It was true last year, even when they won 6 games. One of the first things you think about them is, wow, that's a really talented team. And so you got to give the GM ultimately, and Kyle Shanahan. And again, Kyle Shanahan has a lot to do with this. I've always felt like their relationship, it was an arranged marriage, and they've really made it work. And I'm actually impressed that it has stayed together as long, and a little surprised that it stayed together as long as it has. But very talented guys. They're good at finding guys that work on the offensive line. Maybe a little. I don't know. I give Kyle Shanahan maybe more credit than most coaches, but John Lynch was 7th, by the way, back in 2023. So he's right at the same spot.
It almost deserves its own podcast on how we would separate the coaches from the GMs in these things.
I was surprised that you didn't take your Ravens is Eric DeCosta next. I think they've done a good job rebuilding on the fly while winning a ton of games. They have changed their roster each offseason, really for the last 3 off seasons, especially the 2 before this one, about as aggressively as any team had to, because they just had guys aging out. And he actually hasn't had great drafts, Eric DeCosta, I don't think. We'll see what your numbers say. He had that Kyle Hamilton draft with Linderbaum, which was fantastic. But otherwise, it's been pretty mediocre, which is why, for me, he falls this far, although I had him a little higher on my list. But he is good, I think, at getting guys at the margins to help his team, whether it's a veteran that you add to the mix last minute or just little additions, mid-round picks, stuff like that. I think he's a very solid GM.
Well, yeah, he's solid. I did have him a couple of spots down. Some of that was probably lingering frustration over the Lamar deal, where I felt like the window could have been extended and you could have gotten that deal done earlier. Instead of waiting for the Eagles to make the Hurts offer and being like, this looks good. I think there could have been a more competitive offer made earlier on in the process.
People forget how crazy it was 2 years ago. Remember the Falcons were like, nope, we don't want Lamar Jackson. Remember Lamar Jackson requesting a trade? It was dark days.
And all that was very unnecessary to me. And as well as the public conversation about the difficulty of the negotiation, when it's like, you make an offer, the player decides if he wants it or not. It's even less difficult when there's no agent involved. Depending on who they're working for, most often themselves. But there was that, and I think
Don't get Patrick going on his anti-agent screeds. One of my favorites.
People are probably sick of it at this point. It comes out to 6 years, 9.3.
Okay.
On the scale, where it's you have to give him credit for the trade for Roquan.
Yeah.
PQ ends up leaving and going to the Steelers there, but he makes the Roquan trade. Core pieces of the team look good, and it's they're going to have a chance every year. The most important reason for that, he flirted with not having on the team anymore to save how much money, I don't know.
Right, and technically that he did draft Lamar Jackson. At least he was there. That is maybe like a small demerit on DeCosta, that Ozzie is literally over his shoulder still. Because if you see at the combine, there's Ozzie, but they're a combination, so they all get credit. DeCosta was 13th on my list, by the way, a few years ago. You're up next with the 9th.
I know I'm going way off of your board, and I'm going to have to defend this with passion, and I will. I will take Terry Fontenot.
Oh my God.
I will.
Stop it.
I will.
See, now we can't send out how they've been sending out like a list with the rankings, and I have been afraid that something like this would happen. I can't send this list out now that has Fontenot 9th. I literally have him like 20.
I am
third.
I am sure that you do. I am sure that you do, and I am sure that you also have Mickey Loomis at the very near the bottom, if not the absolute bottom of our exercise.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, are we giving Mickey Loomis credit for 2017?
I'm not anymore. I'm saying who I want to hire right now. I don't want to hire Terry Fontenot. He hasn't done well. Why would Terry Fontenot be 9th?
Because I wanted to come in this with a clear eye, develop a metric, and he has assembled in 4 years 10.29. Scoring higher than Eric DeCosta, relatively scoring higher than a lot of people on this list by acquiring very, very good talent that has played early and had success. And I think that, of course, the albatross is going to be this contract that I feel doesn't get done without ownership involvement, to the extent that you draft a quarterback.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, that you draft a quarterback immediately after the deal because that was something that the boss wanted. You do.
Yeah, but it's not all about drafting. It's about everything that they do.
Well, yeah, it becomes more difficult to do everything when you've got all this money devoted into a quarterback that was literally in recovery, like post-surgery recovery, when they got the deal done.
I just mean, if another GM on draft day is saying like, where can we get a good deal from? Who's going to give up too much in a pick? I'm calling Terry Fontenot. He's given up that extra first round pick. He's been there for 4 years. So a big thing for me is a GM in their third season. You want some proof of concept of what you've done. And right now, he is entering year 5. They've had a losing record every time. He botched the first head coaching hire, and so I'm putting that on him ultimately. The second one, we'll see how that goes. He has the Kirk trade. The high picks have been fine. I wouldn't say, we'll see on Penix. Pitts has been not a good pick. London has been a very good pick, and Bijan's been a good pick too. So, that's about what you would expect. Maybe a little better than you would expect. He brought in Jesse Bates. It's not all terrible, but I knocked him big time for not going after Lamar Jackson and for going for Deshaun Watson. And I don't care if it was ownership. I'm putting Terry Fontenot in that big bucket.
Yeah, and again, it's the difficulty of separating the owner and in terms
they
of
wanted Deshaun Watson, they didn't want Lamar Jackson, and they haven't had a winning record.
I think the individuals in charge of these institutions were the ones responsible for the Deshaun Watson fiasco, including the one that took the blame in Cleveland for it. But
man,
it's just if we haven't seen proof of concept for Atlanta. And the team that we both agree that Jason Light belongs in the top echelon of these GMs.
Yeah.
And they were right there with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during the season in which they had to start a rookie quarterback late. So how is that not proof of concept?
I get that you don't want to just rank vibes. I'm okay. I don't look at it as vibes. I look at it as taking all the information that you have and trusting that you can mash it all up and then come up with kind of what's an opinion and take some things out of context. I would say what's the best thing about the Falcons the last handful of years? I would say the offensive line. Fontenot had nothing to do with that. So that's like the one part of the team that was good. He hasn't been able to build up
they were starting Taylor
defense.
Heineke and Desmond Ridder, dog. Like,
right. Well, that's partly on him. He's entering year 5. It's tough. You want to see a better proof of concept than Fontenot's had after 4 years.
It's a big season in Atlanta. Greg is going to turn me into a bird. I'm going to be the biggest Falcons fan in the world.
Yeah, I have him at 23, ranked 23. We got to pick up the pace. I got to make a pick. No, don't be sorry. I mean, do be sorry that you took Fontenot.
NFC South champs.
I'm loving my Brian Gutekunst value here at number 10. Had him 8th overall a couple years ago. Again, a guy who I think has shown an ability to find a good offensive line, like finding really good players in the second, third round. Man, that is like one of the toughest things to do, and they've done it consistently. So that is a great base to build off. They need to transition from kind of being that team that's like the youngest team in the league every year and being a little more talented. He has 6 first rounders right now, Patrick, on his defense. You would want the defense to be better than it is, and you would want to have better overall players considering the investment there. So that's a little bit of a knock, but overall, you give him credit for the Jordan Love pick and give him credit for a lot else. So I like Goody here at number 10.
Yeah, they've put a lot of talent in a lot of places, almost. And also they've been able to make moves in free agency. You're still shaking your head.
I am because I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking about the way I'm going to have to couch this in a tweet, or if we make a board, we got to put a big asterisk.
One controversial.
And say Patrick made this pick. It doesn't count.
Yeah, sure.
I'm being mean.
Yeah, no, it's not mean to me. I look at talent on the roster.
That's
like
fair.
It's the same conversation we're having about Brian Gutekunst, to where it's like ultimately like Howie's the only one that can take the credit of being good right now. Like Brett Veach as well. Like those are the only 2.
It's fair. If the Falcons go 12-5 this year and they're rolling, I expect Patrick to order some sort of
I won't say a word.
Terry Fontenot t-shirt. I don't know if we could do that. Let's take a quick break and we'll move on from the top 10. Back on NFL Daily. Studio still shaking with the reverberations.
Most controversial thing
the
anybody's
pick
ever said.
heard around the world. So some people saying it's not really even appropriate to do on Memorial Day. That you're not respecting the troops by making the final pick.
I've been accused of many things, Greg.
Let's go number 11. Who do you got? Now I don't know what this system. See, this, if we wanted to really get off track, this is maybe a sign where you got to combine the analytics side with the common sense side. You know, the two sides.
That's what's being done here, Greg.
You can't totally rely on the analytics. That's
what's being done here. Just because you disagree doesn't mean that's not what's being done. I will go down by the numbers to the next pick. No, because this was my rankings. I will take Nick Caserio here, who has assembled a 9.1 over 4 years, where it feels like Nick Caserio has been in Houston for at least 9 years. I was shocked to find out
it's been that many head coaches.
that it's only been 4, and yeah, if not for the precipitous turnover in head coaches, maybe it would have been a little higher had they actually been devoted to winning football games before now. But I just think it's a very good roster. It suits the coaching staff very well, and these players, some of them, haven't had success elsewhere. They've come to Houston and they've been able to accomplish some things. And so I like the way this team is built.
Yeah, that's a great call that they've helped to make other teams players. That's a great sign of a good coaching staff and a good front office. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. He had me in the first few years. I thought he was a bum, Caserio. But they got 2 rookies of the year. The year after that, their secondary is outrageously good. Lassiter, Bullock, Petrie, Stingley, all guys that Caserio drafted. He drafted Nico Collins in the first draft. The Daniil Hunter pickup was good. I'm with you. Adam Peters is going to be my pick here at number 12. This one's tricky because he's only been there for a year and a half, but I think you can only grade on what he's done. And Jaden Daniels gets the most credit for that. But Adam Peters, he took Jaden Daniels. He had great options between him and Drake May, but he took Jaden Daniels, obviously a franchise-changing pick. But a lot of good moves around the edges. The Sandersville pick was good. Finding guys kind of like Bobby Wagner and Dorrance Armstrong and Frankie Louvu who could just step in right away. So what can you really say? I didn't like his picks subjectively. His free agent pickups this offseason, but I really didn't put much into that because we don't know how they're going to work out. So I think it's unfair to put on him that I didn't really love them. They might work out great. So I put him here at 12.
Yeah, it makes sense at 12. The number, for 1 year, it was the best 1 year you could possibly have. Right. So you get a quarterback, you go to the NFC Championship game, he starts every single game. That's going to skew things. Like if you made this a 10, if he had that level of success, the numbers, I know the numbers make sense to nobody, he'd be like 30 points ahead of everybody.
He'd be the greatest GM of all time. If he had that every year. If he drafted Jaden Daniels.
And that's going to be impossible. Like nobody might have that level of success. Like it was almost like in terms of value, like Puka had a similar level of season, but that's not even at the quarterback position. So it's crazy.
See, you were looking at the entire tenure. I'm definitely leaning a little more towards lately, so I'm curious who you're going with next.
I am going with the owner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
And Jerry Jones.
Interesting.
He would be significantly higher in terms of talent acquisition. Because I couldn't even do the full math on his tenure because that would be crazy and the numbers would be just wouldn't make any sense. But just in terms of the recent value in all of these players, he should be higher. But the way that these contract decisions get dragged out and they'll go into a year like having money to spend and not spend it. There's some questionable things, but the talent that has been on the roster during this window has been good enough to contend for a Super Bowl. They haven't done it, but all you can hope to have is the ability to do that. And I think, despite him being the person who signs all the checks, they've been able to do it.
Yeah, I had him 10th last time around. I definitely had him a few spots lower than you, but nothing crazy. Similar negatives to you. His hot streak in the draft has ended, though. So, that's a big deal that he had the Parsons draft with, Odigizua was in that draft, but the best picks in the last 3 drafts or so is Tyler Smith, Ferguson. We got to see some more results out of these recent picks. I did like the Pickens move though, so I think that's fair. Overall, they've done a good job bringing in high-end talent. Man, I really struggle. I do go off vibes a little bit, and I'm on the clock here, and I'm looking at my board, and it says one thing, and yet sometimes you got to be on the clock to feel what's really in your heart. And I want Sean Payton, George Payton now. I don't want to wait around any longer.
Right.
I think Sean Payton and George Payton are bringing a level of professionalism that I'm feeling comfortable with. Now, is it Payton or Patton? I keep forgetting.
It's Payton.
They're both Payton.
Yeah, it's George Payton, but they're not spelled the same.
Yes. Look, he brought in Russell Wilson. That's a pretty big knock on him. And so they haven't had a lot of picks since Russell Wilson because they lost so many in that trade. But they hit on Bo Nix. They hit on Riley Moss. And then I really like some of the free agency moves that they've made. Zach Allen, Jonathan Franklin Myers. Peyton was there, George Payton, when they drafted Quinn Miners, who's turned into an all-pro. And what you see with Sean Payton, and this is where I think his ability to merge personnel and coaching matters, is some of the mid-round guys, he'll add a Marvin Mims. He's going to find a role for Marvin Mims, I think, to be a contributor and a productive player. I know he's a young player, but just as an example of he's going to find roles. So I like him in this spot. I wouldn't have wanted him in the top 10 or anything, but I think he's like a floor raiser.
Yeah, it slots in, and it gives me an opportunity to take a GM that I didn't think that I would be drafting, but I'm going to take John Schneider.
That's who I just passed.
Here, after 15 years, the numbers come up to 16.1. But again, when you have that amount of time, it's gonna lift the numbers up. Again, Jerry Jones would have been way off of this list. I mean, looking back where it was Bruce Irvin,
Yeah.
Russell Wilson, and Bobby Wagner in one draft. They didn't have a lot of picks that year, but through a stretch, like they get Richard Sherman the year before, assembling one of the more notable units that we'll remember from this entire era of football in the Legion of Boom, where I know Pete was a huge factor in that, and judging by the way things have gone in the past few years, they probably had very different visions, but they were able to collaborate and make it work, and this feels like a good spot for him.
Yeah, I wanted to rank him lower, frankly, but then I looked at the drafts lately, and you got to give him credit.
Yeah.
Like Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigba, that's a great draft. The Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Reek Willen. Now I know Pete's still there at that point. There was a slump before that, but the offensive line you got to hold against him. But he's made some good pickups, like Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones were good pickups. I think the first, they should have kept Geno Smith, so I'm kind of knocking them for that. But I also think it's hard to separate like who gets credit for Geno, so I would give more to Pete Carroll. I think that like when I went with Sean Payton though, like over Schneider, for instance, there is something about he's now the man there in a way that I'm not like fully comfortable with.
He's a survivor.
He's like feeling himself, and I think I want like some of these other guys instead. I don't know why, because of that. Just off vibes. Man, we're in the middle of the draft. It's tricky. You can get people feeling different types of ways about Duke Tobin of the Bengals. That he could be at the very close to the bottom of this list or closer to the top because of what he's been working with in Cincinnati. It's a difficult situation. I think that right in the middle is okay. His offensive line fix really has just only gone okay. You got to blame him a lot for what's happened on the defense because they've put a ton of resources there, a ton of swings. Hasn't totally worked. I think over his entire stretch run, he probably would be ranked a little higher for me, but I think I'm leaning. I'm not really giving much credit to something you did 7-8 years ago at this point. I'm thinking more about the last handful of years, and they've been mediocre. I think they need to do better building around Joe Burrow.
Yeah, this was a spot where I was considering Duke Tobin as well. I know that there's frustrations with the Trey Hendrickson deal, but he didn't even mention Duke Tobin by name. It was like it was the coach. Some communication issues in his availability and talking about his contract, and I understand that they got the T and Jamar deals to deal with.
What's very nebulous, what Tobin is clearly running the draft, but I think this is more of an ownership team than most. Not as much as the Cowboys, but closer to that than most teams out there. They're old school, the Browns.
Yeah.
All right.
Teams send us power percentages for decisions, so that we can know. I will go to our relatively newer guys and take Monty Ossenfort.
Okay.
Of the Arizona Cardinals.
It's almost like you're looking on my sheet. That was next. I thought that would be cool.
Well, I mean, do you want him? I'm just going to take.
No.
I don't want to run afoul of your list as I have.
Oh, stop!
Notably earlier.
Stop.
Where I've committed a crime.
I feel bad.
No, don't feel bad. Not for me. I'm fine. Terry Fontenot maybe will want to come after you, but Jason Light might. He'll
be happy.
Yeah, he'll be happy. Like, yeah, the Falcons are trash. Mickey, I'm sure you're a good friend as well. We'll love it. I don't know how Dan Morgan will feel. But yeah, if we're talking about Monty Ossenfort, it needs more data for him and some of the guys I have in this range. But I think taking that situation and going in with a new coach and trying to figure out how to handle your quarterback situation and all of these things, bringing us this search bar of a defense that we're starting to learn a little bit more about. I like the free agent acquisitions as well. This year, so it makes sense. I'll take Monty here.
I really like their offseason. I'm trying not to put too much weight on that because we haven't seen how it's going to work out. But I really like their draft.
They've hurt me before.
I like their offseason. I like that he's gotten contributors in the draft, like Paris Campbell was a good one, and some of the guys in the secondary, like Max Melton and Michael Wilson and who's Garrett Williams. Like they got these guys that aren't household names, search bar, but I think he's done a good job. Like he's entering year 3, so this is like the push year, but there's not much you can really fault in Monty Ossenfort. I think that's good. I don't want you to feel like you can't just draft as if no one's watching, as if I'm not watching. This
No,
is not. I don't want this to be
This is what we're doing.
like I'm listening on audiobook to this kind of tell-all memoir about Facebook,
Mhm.
and it's amazing. It's
Really?
by Sarah Wynne Williams. It's incredibly written. She's a very trustworthy narrator, and everything that you could possibly think how bad it would be to be in the inner circle of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. It's worse than you think.
Does it go over Myanmar?
It is about foreign relations.
Ooh.
It hasn't gotten there, but that was her job. So I maybe haven't gotten to that part, but
Whew.
yeah, it is electric for a nonfiction book. Anyways, it's not unique to Facebook, but I think it was true among her bosses. You know how little everyone would say honestly to the bosses, especially Sheryl Sandberg back in the day. I don't want to be the Sheryl Sandberg or Mark Zuckerberg of NFL Daily, where you're not just drafting who you want to draft.
No, as evidenced by recent history, that is what I'm doing. And go Falcons.
We have a special guest producer here today, Chris Babona, in the chair. Did you follow the reasoning at all of what I was talking about with the Facebook memoir analogy?
Well, yeah, because obviously Patrick always is like on the NFL lines. He doesn't like want to branch out, and you being like Facebook Zuckerberg are always on him.
Okay, maybe. I was just trying to see, like, did that come through? Was that too much of a?
But you got to let Patrick out.
Oh wait, we don't want to do that.
I mean, it depends to a degree. I want Patrick to continue to work here at NFL Media and with me as like long as possible, and so we don't want to let him totally out.
But Terry Fontenot is,
like
is close
mostly.
to
The book is called Careless People, by the way, and it's been a big time
title.
bestseller, better than I could have expected. All right, next up, this is where the list it gets tough for me. I'm gonna go Joe Ortiz. Just so far so good. I just like the cut of his jib. He's the Chargers GM, for those who don't know. Good in front of a microphone. I think has made a lot of really like sound decisions so far. They found some late round picks at cornerback. Cam Hart-Heap still that I liked. I think their first round picks have been solid. They got a little more aggressive. Not crazy in free agency this year. It's more just an incomplete, but so far so good. And for what it's worth, like the guys that they brought in contributed to a team that improved quite a bit. So Harbaugh obviously gets the most credit for that, but he's right there with Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, especially with like the potential for things to change. Like Monty and as well as Joe Ortiz are just kind of right there.
Right, which is maybe why I should have put him lower, but I don't know. I was just like, so far his batting average is good to me. All right, you're up next.
In terms of winning, things have been pretty good for the Minnesota Vikings here as of late. So I will take Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I understand, like, if you're talking about draft value, there's been some trades that have kind of limited things. Like in my metric, right, when you have like a Dallas Turner as well as a first round quarterback that's not going to play, you're not able to get any value for those guys. But there is potential for those things to change. And at this point, we wouldn't be talking about Sam Darnold starting, like being a surefire starter, getting the contract that he got, and dethroning Geno in his position. If not for this front office's efforts, as well as Kevin O'Connell obviously plays a role, but they work together. So I'm sharing the credit and the value there. So I got
yeah. Honestly, I'm laughing because I sort of forgot about Kwesi, and I would have taken him earlier. Now I think, judging by the coach draft we had, like I took him 4th overall. Kwesi wouldn't have been close to that height. Wouldn't have been in my top 10 because his drafts ultimately have been below average by and large.
Yeah.
I would say,
like if we were going vibes
Yeah.
and I didn't try to look at numbers on this, I would have had Kwesi way higher.
but free agency, they got Jonathan Grenard. They essentially like let Hunter walk and got Grenard, a younger player who I think fit the scheme that they have. Not that he's better than Danielle Hunter, but he came in at less money and was a really good free agency pickup. Van Ginkel, great pickup. I think he deserves some credit for that. But yeah, that some of their better like young players are. Blake Cashman was another pickup. He probably should have gone like a little higher. Apologies to Kwesi, but yeah, this is fine. What are you going to disrespect the other people around here? I'll take Omar Khan now. Only 3 drafts running the Pittsburgh Steelers. The more that you hear from reporters, I think Mike Tomlin has as much personnel power as he's ever had. He's probably had always a little more than we realize when he worked with Kevin Colbert, but that was someone that had been in the organization for 2 decades, and now he's working with a younger GM. So I think Tomlin has a big hand in these drafts, and lately they've been good. I mean, it's kind of crazy he's this late because like Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, Herbig, they've gotten some good offensive linemen in Zach Frazier and McCormick. We'll see about Fontenot. He's got to see how Broderick Jones is, whether he's healthy. But the drafts have been pretty good. They don't do a lot in free agency. They made the DK trade, which overall I like. The quarterback position obviously is a huge negative, and so he pays for that. If it wasn't for the quarterback, if he had, I'm trying to think of if he had traded for Geno Smith a couple of years ago or something, and they were like, if they had to fix the quarterback position to like an above average level a couple of years ago, he'd probably be in my top 10. But that's a pretty big knock on the team.
Yeah, you've had a very long time to develop a plan at that position, and other teams have found their quarterbacks. Some have found multiple quarterbacks during that time frame, and you need to address it.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we're gonna wrap up the draft after this. Back in NFL Daily, we have drafted 20 men whose job it is to draft, to be evaluated. Not so easy when the shoe's on the other foot, huh, guys? Yeah. You don't like being picked late.
Turn that microscope on yourself. Look into your cells.
I do feel somewhat bad, but this is what happens when you get to the end of these lists. I felt this way about the coaches too. I was like, we're in pretty good shape. Like, I don't think the next few GMs are, for the most part, have done like a terrible job. It's kind of like having a late night show, as Jimmy Kimmel, I heard one say, like, if you still have the show, that's a success. So like, if you are a GM, that's a success. And especially a couple of these have been around a little while. That's a success for them.
Yeah. Your job is to keep your job. Right. And a lot of times, we've got some people think personalities are exclusive to players. Managing relationships with ownership is probably an important part of the job. And if if you have a job, that's what people like to do. And
well, the older you get, you realize that's so much more important or telling for who gets put forward or sticks around. Like, sucking up to bosses really helps.
I would like to take Chris Greer, who has amassed 13.7 on my metric for a very long time, since 2016, where you get a lot of good players who contribute. The problem is some of those players wind up contributing in places that are not Miami. One notable example would be of, they make the trade of Minka Fitzpatrick. They get a first round pick. They ultimately take Tua in the first round there, but that wasn't the pick that they traded.
They took Austin Jackson with that.
They took Austin Jackson with the Minka trade, first round pick, and they've been contenders. They've assembled a good team. Just haven't, maybe 3 or 4 wins, which is crazy over the course of these years. Could have changed his position in my rankings a whole lot, but I think relative to the rest of the ones that are available, I like getting Chris Greer here.
Yeah, it's around where I had him as well. I had him 15th last time. I think the hardest thing to measure here would be you need to have the sum of your parts be, the team be greater than just the sum of their parts. And I think they would be the opposite of that. I think they've made a lot of moves that individually look like they worked out pretty well, but overall, this organization has always been a little less than the sum of their parts to me. And so I think that's on the GM a little bit. Like a lack of a coherent plan, like going from one thing to the next to the other, and maybe it doesn't all totally add up. Even though like Jalen Ramsey made sense and Tyreek Hill made sense, like all these made sense, and yet it doesn't all come together.
Which is why these like Minka Fitzpatrick, Andrew Van Ginkel, Christian Wilkins, like all of these guys who wind up being contributors elsewhere. Like you had the ability to take them, but you should be able to make that work.
Right. Like according to the local reports, they really wanted like Calais Campbell back this year, and that was going to be maybe an important player for them, and they didn't get him back. And so if we're going to give credit to a Jason Light for making an atmosphere where players want to stay because they like the organization, the situation, we sort of have to give the Dolphins a little bit of a knock. But Chris Greer, hanging on. I think they need to win this year for him to feel good. I'm going to go Chris Ballard next. Infamously, in my own mind, I ranked him number 1 overall, like back in 2016 or 7. I forget what year it was, where I thought they had the most talented roster in the entire NFL.
Do we have a graphic from that? Because I'll put that up if you try to shame me for my Terry Fontenot.
I mean, it's pretty embarrassing. He was 18th the last time I did this exercise, so it had faded. We'll see. The offensive line, which has been a strength and was probably Ballard's, the best thing that he did, now doesn't look as good. The weapons, which were bad, now look pretty good. On paper, I think this team kind of makes sense. I'm not like in love with like his public persona, sometimes a little prickly or condescending, and the relationship with the coaches and the fans and stuff has been up and down. So that's a little bit of a negative to me too for Chris Ballard.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The idea of making your quarterback try extra hard by bringing in Daniel Jones and kind of it's like exclusively Richardson's responsibility. I didn't. Yeah.
I direct anyone that's curious. I mean, you could go to NFL.com or you could go to an SI.com article from April of 2021, which says, King of the Draft, Colts Chris Ballard named best drafting GM in the NFL. And yeah, that was by me. So,
Got him.
He had a good run, and I might have overrated him there. Number 22, you're up.
I will take Ryan Poles at number 22, just purely based off of liking I see the vision more so than some of the remaining choices, where I probably could have, in hindsight, probably could have taken a better GM. But there's been
regret while he's on the clock. Yeah. That's rare. I think it's fine.
You turn the card in.
I think that would have been my pick for what it's worth, which isn't much.
Yeah, the options get limited down here at the bottom. The hiring of Eberflus is something that it takes its skill to survive.
And that was his guy. He really wanted Eberflus, so that's a negative.
And who knows, right? There was a very, very interesting article, I believe around December, about the influence of agents on the coaching searches, where again, my particular soapbox might have come in, and so. But again, we don't know who's ultimately making all these. It's the general manager's job to hire in these spots, and I do believe, based on this offseason, this has been the best Ryan Poles offseason that does warrant a little more belief than previous years.
15-36 overall since he took over as GM, so not a lot of progress. Some good draft picks were like Kyler Gordon and Gervin Dexter. He picked up Montez Sweat and Tremaine Edmonds in free agency. This is a team that's better on paper than they've really ever been on the field, but they're pretty solid on paper. That was actually pick 23. I led you astray, and we are 224. We have 4 more to go. I'll go with Elliott Wolf here just because there's not... He had a disastrous draft other than Drake May, but they did get Drake May.
Pretty big asterisk.
Pretty bad free agency period his first time around. The way that they handled the offensive line, it was all bad. Also, I think he's lost a significant amount of power. I don't truly believe he is the GM in a way that really, and that would be true of anyone else on this list, but he has the title. So does he have the title? I don't even know anymore. The Patriots being Patriots, ultimately, I don't even believe that Elliott Wolf is running this personnel department, but he is the guy who's doing the interviews and on the podium afterwards right now, which is messy. So that's part of my skepticism. But I think it's Mike Vrabel, and I think it's Mike Vrabel's guys that he brought in that actually might have more juice than Elliott Wolf. But I don't know. Just because he hasn't done that much, I'll go Elliott Wolf, and he delivered me Drake May, so that made me happy. All right, number 25.
At a 1.8 WAVA, my tortured metric, Dan Morgan, after 1 year. It's really not enough info to get into. I do see some sort of a vision. I was surprised, but I've been talked into the Ted McMillan pick where I really thought they needed to go defense. And yeah, I like him more than the remaining choices, so I'm going to take Dan.
Yeah, he's just a we'll see. You can't really kill him. His drafts so far don't look like amazing, but he literally only had one the free agency period. Like I kind of liked what he did this year, but he's just sort of we almost shouldn't have ranked Dan Morgan or maybe Elliott Wolf just because they haven't been around long enough. It's tough to evaluate. Mickey Loomis has been around a long time, and this is where I'm leaning into the last few years. I'm really only just grading him on the post Sean Payton era. Like he used to rank pretty high on my list. Like he would be in the top 10 sometimes, top 15. They had some great drafts. Right now he's just aiming for the middle, hanging on to players I believe too long, having a weird obsession that ended up being unrequited with Derek Carr, and Dennis Allen. Just bad. Not who you want running your team. Because he was around it long enough to make a handful of amazing draft picks and he won a Super Bowl title. That's why he gets ahead of just the last couple guys on this list for me. But I'd be fine wherever you put him at the back end. At this point, I think, I don't know. He's just a figurehead. I don't even know what's going on.
And with our last two, I do know where you stand on this. I have seen one, Andrew Berry's shot.
We have Joe Schoen and Andrew Berry are the only two
Kevin
people left.
Stefanski and Andrew Berry sitting there with the owner at the draft, literally looming over their shoulder, leads me to take Andrew Berry here.
Okay.
And maybe it's more of a Joe Schoen thing, but I just think that the big boss is making so many of the decisions regarding everything that it's almost impossible to evaluate either one of them. Even when you consider that Stefanski won the Coach of the Year somehow.
Now, he traded away so many picks for Deshaun Watson. And, the Watson trade alone would just have me put him last. But second to last, it's close enough. They have had draft picks. And the last three drafts, I was looking it up. The best player from those last three drafts is like Greg Newsome or Martin Emerson. Like, they haven't brought in talent via the draft. So that's on him too. His first ever draft pick. I'm big on the first draft pick setting a tone. I don't know why I'm into this in general. And his first was Jedrick Wills, which to me is so typical of them, which is like it looked pretty good at first and then it just hasn't worked out in the long run. And that's how I feel about Barry in general. But the difference between Barry and Shane was Barry wasn't on Hard Knocks, giving the impression that just like not a lot was going on that made you feel like he was an asset as a general manager. I think that's fair. I think people in the league watching that show agree with me, and I heard from them. Like that, just like really, this is what's going on. That's my feel on Shane. He had a pretty good draft though last year.
Yeah, it gave us a level of insight, and to the counter of Andrew Berry, the owner actually wanted the player.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, this is my decision. And that is why, considering the results, I understand the last draft gave us something to be, gave people something to be excited about, but considering the extended amount of results.
Well, and the Daniel Jones contract is not as bad as the Watson trade, but it's bad in a really significant way, in a different way, to self-evaluate that bad and hamstring your own organization after you've already had him there with that coach is tough to survive. Yeah. But he's got one more year here to make it look better. We got to the end. It's kind of a bummer for these guys at the end, but someone's got to come in last.
No, and somebody can game. And they can put this up on a metaphorical bulletin board, maybe like on a Windows desktop, right? And motivate them. They'll try extra hard now because we've been critical.
Well, or the opposite. Fontenot could see that someone believes in him out there and he wants to prove us right. because now it's us.
Well, we get it, the motivation goes both ways because you don't believe, and your lack of belief has more value.
It doesn't matter. Ultimately, when we put out the graphic, it's NFL Daily. Like, we are a team, Patrick. And while I came at that pick pretty strong, now we've got to support him. I can't be sniping to the media behind the scenes.
No power struggle.
I can't be like an unnamed source to Jordan Rodriguez of The Athletic that like, hey, Patrick really blew it with this pick. I had nothing to do with that pick. That was all Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah, you can write a book about it and get some quotes from my dad, and then have a NFL.com article promoting your book written by nobody.
I hope we can recover as a friendship. As podcast.
I think we'll be all right.
We'll be good. That's it for our rankings of the GMs. And yes, if you notice, we're kind of doing this weekly. We're going to keep that up. We're going to get into the positions next. I am really looking forward to that, and really looking forward to the rest of this week. We will have Colleen Wolfe and Jordan Rodriguez back in the studio for our next show. For Patrick Claybon, for Terry Fontenot, for Quessy, we did kind of forgot Quessy. I apologize. We're making amends when it comes to Terry Fontenot because football is back.